Okay, cool. What is up, guys? Finally got everything working. This is Mango's Really Suck here with Thugbard, who recently had
Hey
some
there.
success playing Reasoning Gate Turbo in an online tournament. I think it was hosted by GoFormat.com. 5 rounds, right?
Yeah, it was the one of the Goat Format Friday events they put on. I believe the prize is you can entry into the next World Championship qualifier rather than having to pay through Patreon. So they're free to play. They do them at 2 p.m. Eastern and 7 p.m. Eastern through their Discord. They're a lot of fun. Usually get pretty good turnout.
Nice, awesome. Yeah, 5 rounds is definitely a sizable tournament. Do you remember how many people were playing in it, by the way?
Let me see. Let me see if I can pull up the bracket here. Sorry, bear with me for just a second.
No worries. I'll do some more intro while you're trying to find that. So the whole reason we're
All
making
right.
this video is because every time I talk about this list I'm showing on the screen or I post it or whatever, always get a lot of questions and like debate in the comments about some of the cards' choices. Particularly, I think Sinister, Serpent, and Zaborg are usually the ones that pop up. And I just thought it could be really cool to get the perspective of this list from someone who's newer to Reason Gate Turbo, kind of just learn more about their experiences with this, since this is not really like the standard list that most people are used to seeing when they first start playing Reasoning Gate. So that's kind of the whole reason we're making this video. And then we'll kind of go through some of the replays from the tournament and kind of discuss decisions that were made and whatnot. But anyway, go ahead, Thugbard. What was the count?
Yeah, the tournament was 12 people. It was double elimination, so you had to lose two in order to be
Oh,
knocked out.
I
Yeah.
see. I see. Yeah, I was wondering. I was like, wow, 5 rounds sounds like a lot. It sounds like at least like 32 players or whatever, but or not 32, but whatever it
No,
is. But
this wasn't quite that many, but it did. Like, I think the last two matches were against the same opponent, just because they had won. They had gotten knocked down because of me, and then won the losers bracket, and then were repaired for the finals.
gotcha, gotcha. Okay, makes sense. So before we talk about the list and go into the replays and any discussion, why don't you kind of just explain what your experience with Go format has been, and then maybe what your experience with Reasoning Gate Turbo has been, and how you kind of found your way to playing this list in particular.
Sure. So I grew up with Yu-Gi-Oh, like a lot of the people that play Goat format, I think. I stopped playing around Force of the Breaker. So when I ran across Goat format in about 2021, I was like, here are a lot of the cards I'm nostalgic about. Here are a lot of the heavy hitters. Let's give this a shot. And I think 2020, 2021, with the pandemic lockdown and everything, was kind of a big time for Goat format. I think we saw a lot more people getting engaged online. So I was one of those. I only played for a few months in 2021. I actually was a pretty big Magic player. I played a modern format in Magic quite a bit. So it was one of those things where the lockdown kind of lifted and I gravitated more towards Magic. And then in 2023, one of the guys we were playing Magic with was like, "Hey, you ever heard Goat format?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I sure have." And so I kind of came back for a little bit then, went back to Magic for a little while, and then actually it was just about March this year I started thinking about Yu-Gi-Oh again. I got my Game Boy back out and started playing some of the old Game Boy games. It was around the time
Sick.
the Early Days collection dropped earlier this year. Got me thinking about Goat format again. So I decided to rejoin the Discord and kind of join some of these Friday events. When I came back, I decided I wanted to try to focus on Warrior. In Magic, I play kind of aggressive decks, sometimes more mid range, but I was like, Warrior seems to be something kind of easy to pick up on the surface.
Right,
As I was
right.
playing it, I learned that's not really the case. It's actually a very skill intensive deck. I think
It's
I made a lot of
tough.
poor decisions in most of my games.
I
Um,
think it's got
so
it's
I
got like a
started
low
branching
barrier.
out and
It's got like a low barrier to entry, right? Like anyone can pick it up because the cards are simple on paper, but like there's very little room for messing up. Like the tolerance is so tight, where like when you're playing at a higher level, the literally one wrong move can just cost you the game since you don't have that much potential to climb back, right? It's a very like yeah, for sure, it's hard deck to play.
Yeah, and that's what I was learning, because it just felt like I was in situations with Warrior where I was top decking a lot, and I know that that's kind of an inherent aggro thing in a lot of card games, not just Yu-Gi-Oh. But I don't think I piloted it nearly. If you look at my format library ladder standings, I think I'm dead last because I just drove myself so far into the hole playing Warrior poorly that I was like, okay, I need to branch out and try to find some different decks and see, what else is in the format that I'm not trying, instead of just having laser focus on one type of deck that's not working for me. What else is out there? So I tried, Chaos Turbo. Obviously, that's kind of the next common go to. I wasn't really feeling it. It didn't I know it's a great deck. Obviously, it puts up top results all the time, but it just wasn't. It didn't feel good for me to play. It just
Same,
wasn't really my style.
same.
So some friends and I have been getting together IRL and playing. We put together some, reprints are so cheap for Goat, so you can just throw together decks pretty inexpensively. So we've thrown together Warrior and Chaos Turbo and Goat Control, Chaos Control, and then one of my friends put together a reasoning game, and I played it for the first time a couple weeks ago. I sat down and played his reasoning gate that he threw together, and it wasn't the list that we're looking at now, but it was a list that had scapegoats and various things. It was a little bit different than a lot of the super glass cannon builds, but it was just something he threw together. And I played it and I felt like a god. It lets you like just go through your deck super fast, throw out big monsters, and I was like,
Yeah.
wow, this feels right. So I decided to look a little bit more into it, and that's
Have
kind
you
of
ever
where
seen
we got on this.
Have you ever seen the original list? So the original Reasoning Turbo was called Ham. Are you familiar with that one?
I'm not familiar with that one, no.
Yeah, so like it existed in a different version. It was a lot brickier, a lot less streamlined, but it was running cards like Visor Shock, Air Knight Parshath, um, Jackal, like the 2700 card. I forgot what it's called, Mystical Jackal or something like that.
Okay.
It's like a 2700
Hmm.
light. Sometimes it would play that like Joanne, that like fairy card, that 2800 beater. Um, but it was Ham, like hard as a
Okay. Yeah.
motherfucker. Hard as a motherfucker was the name of the deck, and it was basically just cheat out all these big ass monsters. Was the game plan back then. Obviously, it's a bit more streamlined now, but that's the list that I originally saw many years ago. So I built this deck around 2020 as well during the COVID period is when I first started to mess around with this deck. But even before that, I had seen that list, and that's what got me interested in the idea. Because like, just being able to bring out all these boss monsters in Go format, like you said, it just feels unfair, and it's like the coolest part, right? Like, I don't want to play these. I don't want to fucking beat down with spies, bro. It's so boring, right? I want to bring out these big monsters.
Right.
But yeah. Anyway, sorry. Go
Yeah,
on.
it felt so good to stick big creatures on the board so fast, especially coming
Yeah.
from Warrior, where it's like, yeah, Warrior has big creatures. They got Blade Knights. Blade Knights are huge. They got lots of tools. They've got lots of options. But then, I still want to be aggressive. I like to be a little bit of an aggressive player, but I feel like this deck allows you to go in when it feels right. And I think that's something we'll definitely be discussing in this video. This build in particular, before I tried this build, I found the NB96's Classic Champions 4 build. He went undefeated, I think, last May in 2024. And I liked his build. It ran the Toon Cannon Soldier. I think goatformat.com did a YouTube video on it. It ran the Toon Cannon Soldier package, and it didn't really seem to it didn't have any of this kind of mid-rangey stuff. It didn't have Serpent. It didn't have Zaborg. It didn't have the Fusilier Dragon. It was a lot more. It didn't have Metamorphosis. It had goats, but it didn't have Metamorphosis. It did have one blowback in the sideboard. It
The
did use brain
sideboard is
controls in the
crazy.
sideboard.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, no, it was, but when I was playing that, I just felt like it was really efficient and it came out really fast. But then it was a one and done. It's kind of what you've referred to in your past videos as kind of more of a glass cannon build where you're all in. It's very high risk, high reward. And once again, kind of getting back into the game the last couple of months, definitely, little bit green. if you don't make tight decisions in those matchups, you're going to get punished hard with a deck
And
like that where it's so high risk, high reward.
yeah, and I'm sure we'll talk about it more in the video, but I think right there you're highlighting potentially the reason why I like this list versus lists like that, which is that it's just a different play style. Like I imagine when you're playing that list, there's lots of turns where you're like just passing, not doing anything until you've assembled the full hand, and then you could just like bust on them, right? I imagine there's turns where you're literally just taking
Right.
shots to the face, doing nothing, which is like that's what the deck is supposed to do, right? You just wait until you can OTK them in one turn. But from that angle, like I don't
Right.
enjoy that. Just like from a play style point of view, I don't enjoy just like setting scapegoat passing, like literally doing nothing for like 3 turns and then just beating them in one turn. Like sure, like you're trying to win, but that like not that like that zero interaction is just like it does not appeal to me. Which is like most people are gonna laugh at that because like any reasoning gate deck, people usually feel like it's not very interactive. But at least this list is more interactive, and they'll see it in the recordings when we go through them. It's definitely more interactive than that play style, right?
No, for sure. And some of the things I like about this deck are that I played the Pokemon trading card game online a few months ago. I did the online ladder through live or whatever. And the thing that's interesting about that game is you are blowing through your whole deck. So this deck does feel similar in some ways to kind of the modern Pokemon flow, where it's like you're blowing through your whole deck, you're pulling out crazy monsters. The new, I don't know, having grown up with Pokemon when it was like Gen 1 and then looking at the cards now, it's like everything just feels super OP. So this deck kind of appealed to me a little bit because like it feels a little bit similar like that. I'm blowing through my deck really fast and pulling out big monsters, but this is still Yu-Gi-Oh! Where you do have opportunities to interact with your opponent on their turn. You do have opportunities to kind of hang back and play a little bit more calculated. And I feel like this build in particular hits that sweet spot of balancing. Yes, you can have super overpowering blowing through most of the deck turns, but you also aren't completely banking on that strategy and you're not playing solitaire. And I feel like it's a lot more fun for me. I really like the way this deck plays and just that balance of I can have kind of solitaire turn if I want to combo off, but I also have the ability to rebound if it doesn't work out or just kind of wait for the right time and make a more calculated play.
Exactly, exactly. So, like before, so I think we'll just jump into a few cards in the list, and then after that, we'll talk about go over the replays and kind of discuss them. But before we even get into that, I just really want to highlight or recap kind of what we're saying in that most of the people who see this list and the card choices, they have this like instinctive reaction, almost like I find it kind of closed minded. It's like not very open minded. It's like they're coming into Reason Gate Turbo maybe because they saw someone else play it or they saw a list or they heard about it, whatever. But they're coming in with like a preconception, like a fixed mindset about how the deck should play or needs to play. In that, like, it needs to go for that full one turn OTK glass combo type deal, which is 100% a valid way to play the deck. I'm not even going to make any assertions about if that is the optimal way to play the deck, just like statistically, right? Whatever. But my main point is that like that is not the only way to play this type of deck. And I think when you go into deck building, if you have like these really tightly held preconceptions about how the deck needs to or should play, it really limits the deck for you and like your deck building options. And just because it's like maybe optimally, like statistically, just in general, on average for other people, if it doesn't fit your play style, I feel like it's not optimal for you, is my main point. So, like, I would just really encourage people to kind of like, you know, break outside of those preconceived notions and like not feel that you have to play a deck a certain way because usually when okay, so for Zaborg and Serpent, usually when I get in these online conversations or debates with people, it's people who have never tried those cards, or if they have tried it, they tried it with like a closed mind and they're not, adapting to those cards and playing it with those cards in mind, or they just like haven't even really played the deck that much, right? Like, um, so it's kind of hard to talk with people when it's just purely theoretical or hypothetical situations or theory crafting, and those cards are, I understand how on paper they're pretty unintuitive to what you would think the strategy of this deck is, but it's kind of a thing where like you literally just have to try it and see the benefits and the values for yourself. Because I was in the same spot where I was like, why would I play Serpent? It's not a light or a dark. It's like its stats suck, right? Like, why would I play it? It's gonna slow me down. But then I saw the idea from someone, a couple years back or a few years back at this point, and then I put it in, and then it just solved so many of the problems that I was having when I was playing the more glass cannon version of this deck. And I think that's the part that people have to be more critical about, right? They need to be less attached to certain ideas or outcomes and more just like neutral, unbiased. And like when things aren't working out for them, they need to just like sit back and try to critically assess what isn't working out and how to address those problems. Sorry, I'm going on a little bit of a rant, right? But sorry, do you have any thoughts about that before we jump into
No,
talking about specific
I
versions?
agree with everything you're saying. It makes me like Zaborg in particular, especially when you're playing Metamorphosis, goes crazy. It
Yeah,
unlocks Bolter, it unlocks Fiend's Call Dragon. Those are both huge in the relevant matchups. Fiend's Call Dragon, I don't feel like gets enough love. The few times
it
I've used it,
doesn't.
it's really it shuts down flips, it stops traps on itself. It's silly
If
good
you can
against
read
Chaos Turbo.
If you can read Raigeki Break properly, it's like backbreaking. And um, in a lot of my videos, I talk about how when I'm playing against Chaos Turbo, I like to force them to play incrementally. I like to force them to drop their Sorks one by one to out my cards. And that way, if you can burn through one or two Sorks, you're basically getting rid of their win con, right? Usually, the times when I lose to Chaos
Right.
Turbo, it's when they drop multiple Chaos monsters in one turn. So dropping Fiend Skull, like they have to drop Sork to out this if they don't have like Mirror Force, right? Or Tribe, I guess. So
Right.
it's really good to bait that out. Um, and then also, yeah, just getting rid of Moths and Decos, it's like so good. Um, yeah,
Yeah. And getting, Zaborg even by itself getting rid of sets is huge.
yeah,
I feel like Zaborg and Serpent synergize well with one another since your Serpent might be on board and it gives you that sacrifice. I feel like Zaborg would be worse if it weren't for Serpent being a recurring resource that may not get taken care of. Um, Having Dimension Fusion makes a board good because you could potentially Dimension Fusion, sacrifice a Crane into Zaborg, hit the face down, not have to worry about it, or hit a BLS or something huge, get it out of the
yeah,
way, and that enables a swing. Um, Zaborg, I think, is because of the other cards that are being played here personally, and this might be a hot take, but I think it's better than Blowback Dragon, which you often see in kind of
oh,
a similar spot.
no, sorry, that's not even a debate for me. That's not a hot take in my opinion. So like Zaborg's a yeah, that's not even a hot take. Like Zaborg's a plus one, like a guaranteed plus one. Every monarch's a plus
Right,
one, right? Blowback
right,
Dragon, like whatever level of randomness that this deck has, whatever probability it is, multiply it by the probability of Blowback Dragon, which is like 50% chance of hitting, right? So like whatever your
right,
probability was of winning before, just cut it in half basically if you need Blowback Dragon to land, right? Um, the play you
right,
said, Dimension Fusion into Crane, that's a plus one already. Tribute for Zaborg, that should be a plus one too. And we'll talk more about Serpent in a second, but the synergistic relationship, like you were saying before, it goes both ways in my opinion. Because, like you said, Serpent Tribute into Zaborg is good, but then you're running Monster Reincarnation, which you can pitch Serpent for Zaborg, right? Because a lot of people, when
right.
they see Zaborg in the list, they're like, "Yeah, but what if I hit this off of Reasoning or Monster Gate? It's so mid." But it's like it's a 2400 beater. It gets over
Oh,
Spy.
yeah,
They have to deal with it. Like they have to drop their Chaos Monster because they can't run over it. They have to waste a Mirror Force or Raigeki break on it. It's like they're not thinking that way because like sure it's not the most sexy or like grandiose thing to hit off of Reasoning or Monster Gate, but like a 24 body is huge in Go format, right? Like Warriors,
right. And it's sticking around, most likely on your same turn. So like if you have Genzo in hand, it's a safe sack if you need to for him. Get him out, reincarnate, get Zaborg back, hit him on a different turn. I mean, There's so much that Zaborg can do. He's good. I've never been sad to get him off of gate or reasoning, and he's also level 5, which is a really uncommon call. And I think no one. What other you want 8 and 4? It seems to be most common too. Some people are scared of Stein, which we're not even playing, so that's a gimme. But it's not 8, it's not 4, and it's a 2400 beater. So I'm not even sad when I reason into him. I'm not sad when I gate into him. He has to
And
be answered. There,
yeah, and 24 is a really relevant stat line. I guess we can't really talk about this list without talking about Zaborg, Fusilier, and Crane all together, because anyone who's
right.
played this deck extensively knows that the monster count and the light dark ratio is the probably the biggest limiting factor or deck building consideration when you're building this deck. Like a lot of lists will play like maybe I think 9 monsters usually. This one is playing 11. But the second you add in another light, like Zaborg, you kind of have to balance it out with another normal summonable dark, which is where Fusilier comes into play. And 2400 and 2800 are really, really important stat lines because 24 plus 28 plus 28 is 8000 exactly. So that means Zaborg, Fusilier plus DMOC is game on board if they have an open board. So you really have to talk about all three in tandem with each other, I think. But maybe before we go into Serpent, let's
It,
just maybe quickly talk about Fusilier and our thoughts about that. I don't think there's too much to talk about, but we could just quickly discuss this card. Do you have any thoughts?
um, Dragoon is safe. If you have to meta him, it can't be targeted. So it gives you if you're worried about attacking into some sets, or you're worried about what the set is, like a Knight Assailant that could target, um, having the option to meta into Dragoon to be safe is cool. Once again, 28 coming off the top. They're probably not naming 7. So 28 beater off the top from reasoning is always fun. Gating into it is usually good. It makes dimension fusion that much more powerful because, like you said, I mean, if I exile Zaborg, exile the dragon, get
Yeah,
my chaos
52.
monster out, then I summon both of those. It's game most of the time.
Yeah.
That's too much coming at them. So yeah, having another dark that works with so much synergy with Zaborg, and also 7 being an unusual number to call for reasoning, it adds a lot of value. I think it's really strong inclusion in this deck.
Yeah. And you can even set it, and if they knock it, which they probably will when they're playing against this deck, it's coming back off of Dim Infusion, which is pretty sick.
It comes back
Um,
bigger,
yeah,
absolutely.
comes back bigger, and you also have the option to go into Last Warrior, which I hate doing, by the way. But if you feel comfortable making Last Warrior against like the mirror match, it gives you that option. And then this hardly ever comes up, but it has come up, where you have to make a Twin-Headed Thunder Dragon for the light, just to get the light and dark in the graveyard. So it gives that option. So it's very a flexible card, and just being normal summonable is like the main reason that you play it. Um, but yeah, I think that's pretty much all there is to say about Fusilier. It never feels like you don't feel as cool when you hit it off of Reason or Monster Gate, like when you hit Demok or Jinzo. But I mean, it does its job, which is
Sure.
you know yeah. Okay,
It's
let's
big.
move.
They have to
Oh
deal
yeah,
with it. It's Yeah, and it's
you make
good
it
to pull
against
back out of the grave with if you have no
true,
better hits.
true. Like you make it against Warriors, and they have to Sakuretsu or Exiled Force it or DD Warrior Lady, right? Like they're forced to, and you can just sit on it if you want. You don't have to attack with it, right? Until you like stall. Um, Okay,
Right.
let's go to the star of the show, Sinister Serpent, the most controversial card in this list. The single card where every time I show it, I get so many comments. People saying that the funny thing is, like I said, people who comment on it, they've never tried it. They've literally never tried it. They're just going off of like these hypothetical, theoretical situations in their head. And when people do that, especially for this deck, the situations that they're thinking about are when the deck is running optimally or everything is going as planned smoothly, and they're not accounting for the situations where you brick or you have a slow start or whatever, right? They're just thinking about like, yeah, but what about when I have scapegoat and double triple monster gate? I don't want to hit serpent off with the monster gates, it's gonna lose, right? It's gonna make me lose. So they're always thinking about that, right? And they're not really like, it's almost as if almost as if like, it's so silly to get worked up about this, but I feel like I'm being gaslit. It's like not like I have hundreds of matches with this deck, right? And know firsthand that it works well. But I will say that what will I say? I'll say that Serpent makes your monster gate worse. It's true. It just makes it worse, straight up. Like more so than not. But it makes your reasoning better. And from my
Right.
experience, when I lose with it makes it better because it's a level that they're not going to call, which means that you're going to resolve reasoning, more than you're not. And when I lose with this deck, it's because I use one reasoning or two reasoning, and my opponent gets both calls right, and I just went neg 1 or neg 2. That's one of the cases where I often lose with this deck, so it kind of mitigates that scenario a little bit. And I will say for the monster gate scenario, yes, it has come up where I hit Sinister Serpent and it has lost me the match. I'm not gonna pretend like that doesn't happen, but I think it's really only truly backbreaking when, first of all, Monster Gate, you need another card to tribute for the Monster Gate. Let's just get that clear, right? You need a scapegoat token, or you need to snatch steal something, or you need to crane something. So first of all, to even have this hypothetical conversation, you need to be in the scenario where you already had a monster to tribute for Monster Gate. And then it's specifically backbreaking when Serpent is the monster in the deck right before Demock, because then you would have hit the Demock instead of the Serpent, right? Any other scenario where, like, maybe it was like a Fusilier before it or whatever, is not really that backbreaking. It's specifically you have a monster to tribute from Monster Gate, you tribute it, and you hit the Serpent specifically instead of the Demock, right? Which is very valid, but I would say that you have to play Serpent with that scenario in mind and with a little bit of a backup plan or mitigation plan for if that does happen and you hit the Serpent at a time that's like not ideal. So you do kind of have to shift your play style and your decisions, but that's always the comment that I get from people about, like, yeah, but I was gonna hit Demock instead. I was gonna hit Demock instead. But that situation isn't it doesn't always play out that way, right? But it's the one that people fixate on the most. Okay, I'll get off my soapbox for a second, and
No,
yeah.
I agree with everything you're saying. The Serpent is, I think you said it in one of your past videos. Serpent is best when you have a way, like even if you are kind of forced to gate and you hit the Serpent, if you have a metamorphosis in hand, if you have another gate, if you have a way to transform it, it becomes less of a sad occurrence when you happen to gate into it. So kind of waiting for opportunities where, yeah, I could hit my Serpent, but I have utility for it in this moment is makes it more valuable. Like if I can turn it into a Thousand Eyes Restrict and I need a Thousand Eyes Restrict, I'm more likely to chance the gate. Um,
Right.
of course, it's usually always better to hit a Demock, to hit a Jinzo, to hit one of
Yeah,
your
yeah,
big creatures.
yeah, yeah.
But there are situations where you do hit Serpent, but if you have a way to transform it either into Thousand Eyes Restrict or even it's not excellent, but if you do another gate, then you hit what you need. You still get Serpent back next turn. Um, that's better than a goat. It's having something that recurs is better than the goat that you sacrifice to make that happen. It's not great to use two gates to get there, or a gate and then a meta. I mean, you're going two cards for your outcome, but Serpent coming back kind of mitigates the loss of cards there. There earlier today I played a game on Dueling Book, I believe, where I had two gates in hand. I had goats out. I gated. I hit a Serpent. Gated again. Hit Demock Genzo, one of the big hits. Serpent comes back, and that's just something that I can then pitch for Lightning Vortex. I can pitch it for Reincarnation. I can pitch it for Graceful. If they happen to duo me, it makes it a little bit
Yes.
safer. It's you've also talked in your videos about, situations where you are kind of stalling out. You might not have the goat on hand, but you can use the Serpent as a recurring set, especially if they only have one
Yeah.
monster. You can continue to take hits while you're kind of wait for your answer. So in some ways, Serpent feels both from the metamorphosis perspective and the protection perspective. It functions similar to a fourth goat in a way, which is interesting, and I feel like adds a lot of value to the deck. I think the upsides highly outweigh the downsides for Serpent, and I found it to be pretty versatile. You do side it out sometimes, but I think game one, especially game one, the value there, and to be able to have that a little bit more stall potential if you need it, or be able to transform it, or need it as a resource. I think Serpent's worth a consideration, and I don't think kind of turn your nose up at it is wise until you tried it.
I realize as you're talking, it feels a little bit like an echo chamber, which I'm hoping this is not that, right? Like the whole point of this is to get the perspective of someone who just picked up the deck and it's kind of looking at it from a fresh, unbiased perspective and coming into it. But
Right.
I
Well, I
agree.
mean, keep in
Yeah,
mind though, I mean, I've been playing this deck for a couple weeks. I mean, this
yeah.
is not, I'm fairly new to Reasoning Gate in general. I'm really new to this list. Um, and I did really find a lot of value out of your videos. I felt like there was, you explaining the rationale behind your card choices and situations when they're useful was helpful, and I really appreciate detailed breakdown. But even as I'm playing it on my own and having my own experiences, I'm finding that the Serpent, it just it is a recurring resource that can be transformed multiple ways by this deck, and I think the synergy alone is it's worth the consideration given the cards that we're playing here. If you weren't playing Metamorphosis, or you weren't playing as many one sacrifice creatures like a Jinzo and the Zaborg, or especially if you weren't siding in Vampire Lords, or having these other uses for it, it might not be as useful. Or in situations where you're taking a lot of those things out, in a side strategy, it's not as useful. But I feel like the cards that are chosen for this list really, the Serpent has a lot of value there, and I've seen it in the games I've played.
Okay, so that's a pretty good segue to go into the replays and start talking through those. I'll just make a couple like summary points and wrap up this conversation about Serpent. So I think you started to bring up a really good point, which is that you have to look at the card in the context of the other cards being played. You have to look at the side deck in the context of the other cards being played in the main deck and your play style. And it's really hard to just look at one card in a vacuum, which is often what people do when they think about deck building choices and they're not actually testing it themselves. They look at just Serpent and they, kind of bias towards the situations where things are going to go wrong and don't look at it in the broader context. So I really like that point that you brought up about like, yeah, so the side deck choices also benefit from Serpent being in the deck, or they kind of synergize with each other. So I would just really implore people to not look at things in a vacuum and kind of evaluate things more holistically. And I'll just summarize like why a lot of them are going to be points that you've already made or that we've already made, but why I was even open to playing Serpent, because again, I played this list without Serpent for quite a while before I added it in. And I think the main struggles I was having with this deck, or the situations where I would lose the most, are one, I'm just taking too much damage early on, and I'm not opening Scapegoat or a monster to set to kind of stall it out. Like you said, just set the Sinister Serpent, or maybe you hit it off of the Reasoning earlier. Turn one, not great, but it's face up in defense mode. They can't knock it. They run it over. You get it back next turn. It forces them to commit two monsters to the field. If they want to start pushing, then you can punish them with things like Lightning Vortex or metaing their monster and running over their other monster. So like just getting it out early and just blocking shots, that's already so valuable. And then you get it back, they draw Delinquent Duo second turn, or you draw Graceful Charity second turn, then you're just cooking at that point, and then you can slowly start turning things in your favor, right? So one, it saves you life points, helps you get past the early game, like you were saying. The other thing is like I would keep getting situations where I wouldn't have the fodder for monster gates, right? Like if you don't draw specifically
Right.
Scapegoat, then you're tributing Crane, which is bad. It's a 2-for-1, right? That doesn't
Right.
feel good at all. Yes, Serpent is a 2 for 1, but you get it back next turn, so it balances out, and you're basically going 1 for 1. So I would just get these situations where I would break up on, Vortex, Reincarnation, Monster Gate, Meta if you're playing that in your list, and it's like I don't have the fodder for this, right? Like you said, Serpent, you get it early in mid game, you start using it for your resources. If your push doesn't go through, you have the fallback plan. You have it next turn. Maybe you top deck the Reincarnation and you have the Serpent, there to couple with it. So that's all well and dandy, right? I cannot understate. Sure, if you want to play this deck, Glass Cannon, you only want to really play one turn. Every time you win, you just want to win it in one turn. Totally valid, right? That's your playstyle. Great. But if you find yourself in situations where that's just not working out for you and you need more than one turn to win, then maybe start considering Serpent. And then the last thing is like this deck, more than other decks, gets absolutely smacked by Duo, right? Like any combo deck, like Duo is Duo is already everyone's least favorite Go format card, but if you're playing a combo deck, Duo is like the bane of your existence. And those were the three things that I felt like were really screwing me over when I play this deck. And Serpent just helps, mitigate Duo that much more, right? Whether they start off with it, whether they draw it later, um, it just really helps with that problem. And that also informs my decision to play the higher monster count, the higher light and dark, right? Playing higher light and dark count also helps with Duo, right? Because you can pitch that and set your grave up for your Chaos Dimension Fusion play. And then also, I found that with the decks that are running like 9 or 8 monsters or whatever, Graceful Charity feels so shitty, right? Because you're just discarding like spells off of it more
Mhm.
often than not. But with this one, you're discarding, your Zaborg or your Fusilier, which sets you up for your Chaos Dimension Fusion play later, right? So, yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say about Serpent. Oh, the last thing I'll say about Serpent is I've been in so many situations, a non-trivial number of situations where Serpent is blocking Spell Canceller or Last Warrior hits, which is why. Okay, in all of my experience playing the deck, I think I've only really lost to a first turn Last Warrior. Like I can count on the number of hands. I think like once or twice maybe. And then when I make Last Warrior, I've lost every time I've played the mirror match and I've made Last Warrior first turn. I'm not sure why it happens, but they always just like have the Snatch Steal, which is theoretically like the only out to it. But I've always got punished for making it, and I've always punished people for making it because they can't summon either. So I just set the Serpent, wait till I have the out, and then whatever. Okay, we've already talked enough about these cards, but I hope at this point people kind of get the idea, or the theory behind it, or not even the theory. I hope they actually play it for themselves and see it.